When things aren't black or white, we live our life in the gray.
Join us in conversing about God, church, and culture. My name is Derek.
And this is Luther.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to this week's episode of Life in the Gray. How you doing, Luther?
I'm doing all right. How you doing? Yo, 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 yo.
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. How's life?
Life is good. Can't complain, man. You doing okay?
Yeah. I'm very excited because our last episode ended kind of on a cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. So we left this question up in the air. We hope you guys, by the way, if you haven't gotten to hear it, it's called 20 Questions. And it's basically Luther and I just going back and forth, asking random questions about our lives, and learned a lot of cool things about you there.
Some things we even debate about off the air, but you know.
Sometimes you gotta keep it light, you know?
Yeah.
So we did kind of end on a more serious note, though, and it was this question that we left in the air of what is it like growing up and being in America as your specific race and ethnicity. And that's a heavy question that you can't just unpack in a couple of minutes. So today we got an exciting episode for you. Joining Lou and I is a special returning guest, Mr. Proverb Newsome from the Soul Journey podcast, and first-time guest, Miss Pamela Newsome.
His lovely wife.
The lovely wife. And so they're going to bring a different perspective than what Luther or I can bring to the table.
Definitely.
And so I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah. Anything that you guys probably want to say?
It's good to be back. Life in the Gray is kind of a special podcast. Always like being here, listening to you guys. I think I just checked out your, what was it? Calvinism was the last one I checked out. So I'm a few episodes behind. But yeah, it's definitely good to be back.
Awesome.
And I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy about that.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here today. So last time you were just starting your podcast.
Yes.
And now it's up off the ground. So where can people find you?
Man, I'm on Podbean. Same as you guys. That's my main platform is Podbean. I'm also on Apple Podcast as well. I'm not sure of any other podcast platform that I might be on though. I know for a fact Podbean and Apple, but that's it.
Yeah, I know it's funny because that's kind of, we've seen our podcast kind of pop up in random places that are like, I didn't submit it there, but someone found it there, right. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean that's the main place. Other than Podbean and iTunes, you can find me on www.proverbnewsome.com.
Awesome. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into our. All right, so we know we have a lot of listeners out there from all over the world, which is really cool.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Shout out to our friends in United Arab and India, Australia, Canada, Germany, UK, Czech Republic, Denmark, Islamic Republic of Iran, and Japan. Thank you guys for checking us out. And so the conversation that we have today is something that maybe you catch wind of, maybe you don't, but basically we're at a time right now in America where racial tensions are just a little bit high, wouldn't you say, Lou?
Yeah, but I'm going to need Africa to get on the map real quick.
We do need to get Africa on the map. We got to get the continent of Africa. We need to get South America as well. We need to get Wakanda on the map. Come on, all you Wakandans out there. Oh, man. So, yeah, for those of you who do not live in America or may not be aware of what's going on, there's a lot of racial tension coming. I don't know. I just feel like we're in a season right now in this country where just a lot of ugliness is coming out. But at the same time, there's a lot of good conversation that's happening. And so I think the most important thing is that we need to be able to listen to each other. We need to be able to have dialogue and understand where we're all coming from. And that's what we're going to do here today. So the first question that I kind of want to throw out there is, what is your racial, ethnic makeup? So let's start with that. If we can just go around the table and just say real quick what your makeup is. So I'll go ahead and start. I'm white as white bread, but some people don't know specifically. I'm German, Italian, Irish. I actually am part Puerto Rican. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm ethnically Jewish as well.
All right. I am a Haitian American. To the American society, it would probably be considered black by their standards. So
I am African American. That's all I know. I haven't consulted Ancestry.com or anything. That's as far back as I go. African American, aka black.
and that's Proverb.
I have actually consulted Ancestry.com. And I am Polish, English, Irish, and French,
Wow.
Nice.
AKA white.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys. So now that we kind of are aware of just what our makeup is and what we know, I want to ask you guys, what is it like, or what has it been like growing up and being your specific, ethnic makeup in the country of America? So, Proverb, do you want to start?
Sure, why not? So that's a huge. I guess for me, it's really I have to think about it in a lot of different contexts. Okay, so as a child, growing up was great. My parents taught me right from wrong. They taught me a lot of things about America. They also taught me that to be very aware of my surroundings and who I am in my surroundings. So I was always aware that I was black, number one. Okay, so you hear people being raised colorless, like, oh, I don't see color. In my household growing up, there was definitely color. We were black, and those who weren't black were white, period. My parents were sharecroppers. They grew up in rural Georgia, so they were a couple generations away from, the Emancipation Proclamation. So they were very well of what racist looked like, what racist tendencies were. When people were being racist, they knew that very well, and they taught me that you have to look out for this as a black kid growing up. And so that was my childhood context. Growing up, they sent me to an all-white private school. So here I was, very aware of my own blackness, but surrounded by a sea of white people in a private school. And the context of which my parents taught me about white people was very different. Even though there was slight hints of what they had educated me about concerning race, for the most part, my interactions were very positive. I got to know white people on a different level. I got to see them as even equals. I never thought I was less than. And so I kind of got my own understanding about race just by being interactive with the opposite race, in school. Then culturally, especially now, we see that racism has come back to the forefront. Okay, so I'm not going to say that it ever left, but it's here. It's been bubbling. It's like the slow undercurrent that's under our American culture, and you see it openly in some places. You see it systemically in a lot of places. Government institutions, education institutions, all over the place. Systemically, it's never left. It's there. When women talk about a glass ceiling, that's racism. So it's a huge question. So as a black man in America, my experience has been all over the map as far as what it's like to experience that. But one thing I can always say is that I've always learned from the interaction how to combat, how to confront, and just how to be aware that it might be around me.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, Pam, how about you?
Well, interestingly enough, and I didn't realize this until recently, growing up white in America means you don't really have to think about it very much. You just are.
So true.
There's not that talk. There's not, oh, by the way, you're white. This is how you do things. And so I had never really realized that. But I was fortunate enough to grow up here in West Palm Beach and in a neighborhood that became diverse very quickly. And so I grew up with friends who were white, with friends who were black, and I mean, that was pretty much it. I don't really remember saying, you're white, you're black. We just were neighborhood kids together. And again, I carried that with me through high school, through college, into my adulthood. And it was only recently that I realized that I never really had to think about what it meant to grow up white.
No, that's real, and I love how blended their experiences are, like how diverse they've experienced both sides. So
Yeah, absolutely. And Pam, I can relate a lot to what you're saying because it was the same thing for me. Where I grew up in California was super diverse, and you just kind of took it for granted that people were different races, and I'm white, and it just you never thought about it. So I think you guys bring two very different perspectives together. Now, where it gets even more interesting is that you guys are married and you've brought into the world children who are of mixed race.
True.
And so what has that been like? What has it been like, first of all, like being in an interracial marriage and then having kids who are, a mix of black and white?
Go ahead, you can tackle that.
Well,
I'll jump in later.
It's interesting when you talk about interracial marriage. And I have to say that during our dating and courtship and marriage, I can't really point to any specific examples where we were targeted. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I will say there was some resistance from our families on both sides of just wanting what they knew. You alluded to that earlier.
Yeah,
and
right.
So for us, once we've been married, I feel fairly supported. I know there's many, many people that don't understand it. I know, people have said things that just point out the fact that they don't quite get it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, overall, it's been a positive experience for me. I'll wait and let you comment, and then I'll talk a little bit about what it's like raising interracial children in America.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think we were ever really targeted per se as far as they're a mixed couple or a biracial couple. We did. We met some resistance from our parents on both sides. Like Pam said, it wasn't like they didn't like black people or my parents didn't like white people. It was more along the lines of, we really don't want things to be hard for you. You know what I mean? It'd be easier if you married someone of your own color. No one would target you that way. And so I don't think that they were closet racist by any stretch of the imagination. They just kind of wanted things to be easier for their kids. And so, but I think once our parents met me and her and saw us, and it became they got won over very quickly, and we haven't really had a pretty easy time of it as far as racist people targeting us for anything. God willing, it won't ever happen, but you just never know. You know what I mean?
I was just going to say, moving on to having children. So again, going back to what Derek and I talked about of not having to really think about race, I honestly thought that I would raise my children colorless. Ha ha ha. And I did. So we did so for quite some time. I can remember the first time our oldest was probably about 4 and our youngest was 2. And our oldest is a little bit darker complexion than our youngest. And someone came up to him, a child, and said, "Oh, is your brother black too?" And it was like the needle scratched across the record, and the adults kind of looked at each other because we had never told our children what they were. So I went along with this notion of being able to raise colorless children until things started happening in our society. And after Trayvon and Eric and Michael Brown and Corey Jones here locally, I realized that if I didn't begin raising my interracial, biracial, half white, half black children as all black boys growing up in America, that I was doing them a disservice and I was potentially putting them in harm's way in a dangerous situation. That was very difficult for me because as an adopted child, I finally had people in my life that actually looked like me. And so I really wrestled with the fact that I was kind of giving away their whiteness because this is the way society was set up. So it was very difficult times. And now, though, I have fully embraced the fact that when they go out of the house every day, that they are young black boys living in America. And so that has shaped how we, and I in particular, as a white mother, have parented them.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting perspective.
I fully remember trying to convince our youngest son that he was black because he was like, he would look at me straight on and go, "I'm not black." I'm like, "What color am I?" And he used to go, "It's black." And I was like, "What color is your mom?" "White." "What color are you?" "White." No, you're black, buddy. You're black. Like, I had to convince him of his blackness, and now it's like, I'm trying to strip him of his blackness because it's like all things hood he's embracing. It's like, come on, man. But yeah, she's right. I mean, we don't ever want to put our kids in harm's way.
Sure.
And with a culture as racially charged as America is right now, to not give them all the facts is half equipping them to deal with what's going on and what will continue to go on for as long as they live. For them to walk out thinking, you know, I'm white, means that they can just live their life, be in any situation, and not worry about things.
Sure.
Never have to get caught driving while black. Never have to get stopped on the sidewalk for no apparent reason other than your skin of your, color of your skin. Never have to maybe miss out on a job opportunity because you're not what they're looking for, quote unquote. White people don't have to worry about that. And if he thinks, if our sons grow up thinking they're white, then that's the mindset that they're in. And then so when those things actually start to happen to them, now they don't know how to cope with that because they're thinking one way, but society and culture is treating them another way. So they need to be fully equipped with, you're black, and this is what could potentially happen to you. This is how you could potentially be discriminated against. This is what people may say about you. This is what you may or may not be able to do. This is where you may or may not be able to go. These are things that you think of when you're black. When you're white, you just go and you do, And it's been thrown around a lot lately in our culture, white privilege, and white people really get offended by that. And I understand why it could be offensive, but to say that it doesn't exist is even more offensive overall because the fact that you can ignore it because it exists means you're offending someone because you're now enjoying white privileges because you don't want to talk about what you enjoy on a daily basis from the time you're born to the time you die. Because that's just what it is,
Yeah.
Just as much as you enjoy those things as a white or a Caucasian, I have to concern myself with the dangers of being black.
And I think that alone makes it interesting because the fact that Pam and I have never had to have a conversation or worry about that, and I'm sure you have as well, Lou, that tells me alone that there's something else going on and that there is some sort of privilege that's there, that alone. Just that one piece right there, let alone anything else that we talk about. Lou, do you have any thoughts before we go to the next question?
No, I think that was strong. I think definitely hit it on the nail with that one. But I wanted to ask you guys probably been seeing what's been going on in recent news as far as with Starbucks and what happened with those two black males and how America's almost, outraged at that. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, how do you feel like race is going today in America? Do you feel like it's progressing? And can you speak a little bit on what happened in the Starbucks incident? And do you feel like they're making progressive steps? Because some people on one end are like, no, that's not enough. And other people are like, can't you see, like, they're shutting down a day. He's doing the best they're doing the best they can at this point. Like some other big time businesses sometimes overlook it. And it seems like they're making steps. So like, what is your thoughts? It's like a two-part.
Well, I'm really happy that the word implicit bias is making its way into the forefront of our conversation because what that means is no one wakes up, hopefully that we know, saying, I'm a closet racist and I'm going to come out today and this is going to be my life today is going to be to make people of color's life miserable. No one leaves the house thinking that. However, we all leave the house with this implicit bias. And the simple fact that an entire group of people is targeted because of the color of their skin means that we have a long way to go. But I'm very happy. Implicit bias happens very quickly. It is that snap judgment that's made. There's no facts necessarily behind it. It just happens. And I believe that's what happened in this case, and I think, unfortunately, you're still going to have a large segment of the population that says, get over it, snowflakes. I think that's the term, that a lot of people are using, or it's just those liberals talking, and then it becomes a politically charged issue. The reality is that these men were not believed, were not trusted with the truth, and they were treated accordingly, and we do have a problem in that instance. Implicit bias is a lot more difficult to deal with, though, than the straight up racist.
Yeah, Luther, that's the snowflake thing. That's what they love to nickname us, the millennials. They just think of us as snowflakes. So, so kind of a follow up question to that, then, because I do agree that this implicit bias is everywhere. All of us have to deal with it to some degree or another. So why is it important to have friends who are different than you, that are ethnically, racially, culturally different than you?
I think it's important because when you look at the diversity of America and its totality, our strength as a country comes from our diversity. And so when you have people that are all the same, or that you have people that want everything to be all the same, what you end up with is Hitler and the Aryan nation. And that's no good for anyone. History has proved that's no good for anyone. So diversity, different friends from different cultures and ethnic backgrounds helps you learn because you know who they are, you trust them, or you wouldn't be friends with them. You learn from them, you learn about their culture, they learn about you, they learn about your culture. If they're friends with you and they'd never been friends with an African-American person before, then that's going to shatter all kinds of stereotypes that they have grown up with, that are maybe ingrained in their personality. And then they have the opportunity to ask in a trusting, safe environment, hey, this is what I believed about black people. And you get a chance to debunk that in real time right in front of them. Not just for yourself, but for a whole entire race of people that they're believing that myth about. And I think that's why it's really good to have friends from all over the place, not just, other black friends or lighter skinned black friends, but, Puerto Rican friends, Czechoslovakian friends. I know I butchered that word, but all across the map, all across the globe, just diversify your friendships as much as you can because it's just going to make you richer as a person.
And that's very true. I think the fight for racial equity starts with people kind of reaching hands across the aisle and being able to say, listen, Luther, I trust you, we work together, and you're telling me that you were pulled over and you were involved in a situation or you weren't served at Starbucks or whatever the case may be. And I have two choices. I can either say, Luther's just militant, he's off base, he's angry, he's whatever, or wow, maybe something he's saying really does bear truth, and maybe we should, sit and talk about this. And so the other thing, too, that I'll point out as somebody who's involved, and we all are at this table, in the education of our next generation, is one of the single most important factors for children, and this specifically deals with children in poverty. Not necessarily along racial lines, even though we do see some of that. But for children in poverty, one of the biggest factors of success is having them attend schools with children who are not in poverty. So again, I think when we talk about differences, that's another one to bring up, is the fact that when we can all come together from our different perspectives, whether they're income, racial, ethnic, it just makes everybody better.
No, that's a strong point. That's good. I was wondering, do you guys think, I know we talk a lot of times when it comes to racism in America, we talk about the white and black issue, right? Do you feel like sometimes we are leaving out, other ethnicities such as the Hispanics, Asians, any other? Do you feel like they need to be brought more into the conversation? Or I know a lot of that has to do with the rich history of what happened in America with blacks, but.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that people of color in general are maybe discriminated against because, again, people of color are starting from a deficit in the fact that America, we didn't have anything to do with the founding fathers. There wasn't a black face in the founding fathers that I know of. Okay, I could be wrong. If you're out there and you know different, please email
us.
Yeah, email me, find my phone number and call me. Let me know. I don't want to be off base, but as far as I know, there were no black hands in the founding of our country, not in the Declaration of Independence, not in the Bill of Rights, not in the Constitution. It was all white men. And I get, that's it, whatever it may be, that's fine. People of color have already started with a deficit. So, yeah, I think that blacks are discriminated against. I think that Asians have their own struggles. I think that Hispanics have their own struggle. Mm-hmm. Everybody that's not white has a struggle. Mm-hmm. And it's real. Yeah. Okay, it can't be just dismissed because they're militant or that's just, that day, or it can't be, isolated incident. It's a real struggle. And it can't be dismissed. And I think probably the biggest bone of contention I have right now with the tension in our country is that people are so dismissive of the reality of the American black person right now. Because it's always in the forefront of the news and people are always crying racism. But why is that? Why are they? What other card do they have if that's what it is? Mm-hmm. You can't call it something it's not. If that's what it is, then you call it what it is. And then you deal with what it is. You don't gloss it over. You don't say just get over it. You have to deal with it, right? So, you can't put a Band-Aid on a bleeding artery. You have to do surgery and actually repair the artery so that you don't bleed out. Sure. And I think as a country, we've centuries and centuries of Band-Aids, and it's been bleeding all along. I think that's where we are.
That's a good analogy. I think that really sums it up really well. And I appreciate what you said about, other groups as well, because when I was in California, the first cases of racism that I noticed were not actually involving black. It was actually involving Hispanics, because growing up in Southern California, close to the Mexican border, you have a lot of people going around saying, oh, they're illegals. And, and I was a part of that. I was definitely guilty of they shouldn't be here. They need to all go back. And, and that's just what you grow up in. And that's what you hear. So I do think that it is a pressing issue and it's not going away anytime soon. But we can pray that it will, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So what I do want to leave our viewers with here is, from each of your different perspectives, what would you say are maybe one or two blind spots that that people like you tend to have? So when I say blind spots, I mean when it comes to dealing with race, when it comes to healing and repairing all the damage that's been done in people's lives in this country, what are some blind spots that you typically see white people have when it comes to this issue? And same with you, Proverb, what are some issues and some blind spots that you see with people of your race as well?
Well, there's two actually that come to mind. The first one is that when we talk about white privilege, which I think Derek defined earlier by the fact not having to think about being white, is a clear example, that what the implication is that you didn't work hard to get to where you are, that everything was handed to you. And I think that's a huge, huge blind spot that white people have, is to say, well, white privilege means that everything was handed to me. My parents were Irish immigrants and they came here and they were denied jobs and housing.
What privilege?
Right, those sorts of things. And nothing was given to them. And so I think that's a real block to really realizing that there is a certain inherent white privilege, regardless of how hard your family worked when they got here. The flip side of that is, why can't black people just pull themselves up by their own bootstraps? That's what we did, right? And when you look at the history of this country and how there were no straps, there were no boots, you really have to say, are there systemic institutional things that are currently in place that we really need to dismantle in order to move forward? And so I think those are the two things for me that just jump out immediately, and we need to stop doing those things.
That's good.
Yeah, I think for the American black person, all white people are bad. All white people have the black man's interest at worst. They just want to hold us down. They don't want to see our progress or help us progress. And I think that's a myth as well. I think that not all whites are bad. I mean, if you look at the civil rights movement, there were whites that were sympathetic to the movement. There were whites that were beaten and bloodied on Bloody Sunday across Pettus Bridge, as well as the African American, person. So to say that they're all whites are bad is again a racist statement, because it's just a stereotype and a bias that has been passed down culturally, just as much as black people are lazy, all whites are bad, or black people like chicken and watermelon. All whites like
kale and quinoa.
Kale and what?
Kale and quinoa.
I can destroy that one right now. So, disgusting.
And that's not true, but we're just a stereotype.
And don't forget bland potato salad.
Oh man!
I mean, just for the record,
jokes.
I'm black. I love kale. I love quinoa.
Right?
Because you have a white wife.
Oh, right, that may be true. That I've been conditioned. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yeah, man, I think that if one of the great things about being alive in this time, man, is just number one, having a medium like a podcast to be able to discuss this kind of stuff. I think that we're in a culture where people are having good dialogue about stuff like this. I don't think enough of us are having good dialogue. I think a lot of us are having one-sided dialogue. Our point only. I'm gonna tweet that out. My point only. I'm gonna Instagram that out, and I'm gonna show you my opinion on this thing, and that's the only thing I'm gonna project or accept. If it's anything like me, accept it. If it's anything unlike me, reject it. And I don't think that's healthy. As a culture, I don't think it's healthy. Because again, going back to the diversity of America, if that's the way that America was started and continued to be, we would not be one of the most affluent countries in the world, or on the globe. Because diversity is what helped build our country. So if we as a culture go back to a mono way of thinking and a mono way of projecting our views, that's horrible. There needs to be a balance. There needs to be a check and a balance, right? So all sides need to be heard. All sides need to be given voices, and just put it out there in the open marketplace and have a discussion instead of trying to shut somebody down because their opinion differs from yours.
That's good. That is good. Guys, time is approaching us, but man, I think we definitely need to have this conversation again. We would love to have you guys in the future if you guys would be down for that, because we would love to get even just more deeper into what are some practical ways people can be a part of that, and just other things. And I know we don't have the time for, but man, appreciate the wisdom and the thoughts from Prav and his wife Pam. Just two great perspectives, and them just the life experience that they have. Thankful for that. I don't know if you have, Derek, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think this has been a great and healthy conversation. I think it's good to listen to each other, and I think next time I think we need to talk about how this impacts the church as believers. So I do think we need to do this again and just continue to have these discussions. But I do just want to end by saying that to all of our listeners out there, whatever race you are, seek to understand before being understood. I think that's one of the most powerful pieces of truth and wisdom that we need to apply into our lives daily here in America. And I think when we begin to do that, I think we're going to begin to understand how to live life together. And we know as Christians, we know that God calls people, all types of people, to come together and to live in Him. And we know that God doesn't discriminate, and we know that God doesn't look at each of us based on the color of our skin. And we know that God is also on the side of the oppressed. And we know that if any of you have ever felt that racism or that oppression before, we know God is with you. God knows and He understands. He experiences that in and through us. And so we just want to say that it's okay to wrestle with these things. And it's about time that we all start listening and begin this healing process. And so we need to pray for each other. We need to pray for this country. And we need to pray that God's love may lead us in the right direction. So thank you guys so much for checking out this week's episode.
Any final thoughts, man?
Yeah, do you guys have any final thoughts?
I was just going to say, you mentioned about practical ways that the church can help and get involved. And I would say for homework for everyone, the church is a great learning lab. If you go to a church that's all white, invite some black people.
Yeah.
If you go to a church that's diverse, that is a really good, non-threatening place to just sit down and have coffee with someone, get to know someone, learn about their perspective. So, use the resources in the church to begin this healing process.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. The discussion is not going away, and neither are we. So we will be back to discuss this in the future. In the meantime, check us out for our next episode in 2 weeks about music. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.